Hey, this is John with Two Moose Home Inspections, and welcome to the September 2021 in-service training. Hey, this is John with Two Moose Home Inspections. If you're new to our in-service trainings, what we do is we go through a lot of the deficiencies that we found over the past month, and we talk about some of the updates to the company. Now, there's a lot of information to cover, so make sure you put it at 2x speed so you can get through it very quickly. Now, let's jump right into it. So one of the things that we have is that our tools are tools for home inspecting. There are some that are waterproof, and there are some that are water resistant, and then there are some that are just so super delicate. And so some of our tools, one of the things that we discuss in our in-service training is what tools are safe to get wet, what tools are not safe to get wet, and all of that kind of opened up a discussion because we had a lot of rain over the past month, and that is very abnormal in Colorado. Now we have snow, so that's neat. But basically, what we have going on is that some of our tools can get wet, some of the tools cannot get wet, and it's important to know which ones can and which ones can't. So whenever you're standing out there in the middle of a rainstorm and you have your leather harness on, that leather harness, the funny thing is leather is waterproof. The dye that they put into the leather is not necessarily waterproof. And so it's one of those things that if you're in the middle of a rainstorm, you really don't necessarily want all your tools and your tool belt getting wet, especially if you're about to enter into somebody's house. So the next thing that we have are some updates. So we got new rain jackets. The rain jackets look so good. They are some really nice Patagonia rain jackets. They're embroidered. They look wonderful. Everything to the top because, again, it was raining a lot. And I said, listen, our guys need to get some rain jackets. So we got them some rain jackets. Working out very, very well. Shay and Jeremy, they both got new trucks. Oh my gosh, like so exciting. So basically, both Shay and Jeremy are running trucks that are brand spanking new. So Jeremy's truck was my truck. I have a different vehicle now. And so that truck is a 2020 Toyota Tundra, and it is maybe 8 months old right now. And Shay's truck is now a 2021 Toyota Tundra. It is now a week old, and it is brand spanking new. So both these guys are rocking brand new trucks. Very, very excited for them. They are also very excited because it's just awesome. Now, the next thing you're going to see on there is that I am in North Carolina. What you can't really see behind me because we're in the studio is that I'm actually in a completely different state. So just so everybody is up to speed and everybody knows what's going on, my wife graduated medical school in Colorado. So she is now a doctor. The next step of being a doctor is you have to go through a residency program. So basically she got all of her education and now she has to have her in the field training. So for the next 3 years, we're going to be in North Carolina while she is finishing up her residency. Now, we did not sell the house in Colorado. We are coming back. We are definitely coming back. But the thing is, first, my wife needs to finish her residency, which is going to be 3 years long. She might do a fellowship. That could make it 4 years long. And that would be amazing. So again, my wife is a doctor. She is going into a specialty of emergency medicine. So she is going to be an emergency medicine doctor. That is basically what she is going to be. And so that is why I am here in North Carolina to help support my wife. So I'm in North Carolina. We have Shay and we have Jeremy out in Colorado, and I will be coming back to Colorado. That is a guarantee. So the next thing, if you are subscribed to our newsletter, then you more than likely have seen that we have a whole series of short videos on wells. And so we have, during our in-service training, we've talked about well recovery, submersible pumps, pitless adapters, 4-season wells, finding well permits, and deep well air volume controls, and a whole bunch more. And so what you have online is just a brief summation of a lot of that information that our inspectors really dig deep down into and kind of go into a lot of fun conversations about different things about wells and whatnot. Now, one of the things that has come up is that there is this company, and this is kind of what sparked the entire thing. And on their website, and I would love to read this to you. So on their website, they say, we only perform full well recovery tests, yield testing, which gives our customers the gallons per minute recovery rate of their drinking water well. That's the thing that got me. Some lesser companies, so that would be us, I believe is who they're referring to. Some lesser companies, and I mean basically anybody else that tests the way that we test. So what they should have said is companies that test this other way, blah, blah, blah. But they said some lesser companies will perform a simple 2-hour flow test that does not deliver the customer the recovery rate for their well. And that is accurate. It does not. It does not give the recovery rate of the well. They are 100% correct. But just because it is a different test doesn't mean that it is a lesser test, or that the company performing it is a lesser lesser company. Goodness gracious. So the main thing to keep in mind here is that what they're talking about is that they are testing the flow rate or the flow recovery rate or the yield testing of that well. So they are saying of all the stuff that comes into the well, all the tributaries, all the natural springs, all the ways in which water can get into your well, I am able to tell you that your well can produce 15 gallons per minute. That's amazing. It's amazing. 15 gallons per minute. Awesome. Well, we just said that your well test failed. So wait, why did Two Moose Home Inspection say your well test failed if they're telling you that their well test can produce, that your well can produce 15 gallons per minute? We're telling you that because maybe the well, the actual pump failed. Maybe we have galvanized pipes that have corrosion on the inside and they have restricted to the point that you aren't able to get enough gallons per minute into the house. Maybe we have an issue with some of the electrical things. Maybe we have an issue with whatever. And at the end of the day, in a 2-hour test, you only produce 20 gallons of water. Wait, but I'm getting, 15 gallons per minute or 20 gallons per minute coming into the well. Right, but you only got 1 gallon per minute coming out. So our test is not the theoretical, what can the well produce? It is the practical, what can the well actually do? And so what can it do in the house? Now the thing is, this test is extremely valid that they're talking about, but this test needs to be done in conjunction with another test such as ours to make sure that the pump is actually doing what it's supposed to do. It doesn't matter that the water level can recover at a certain rate. It matters what the pump inside of that water can do. That's what we test for. It cracked me up that they said a lesser company. It is not a lesser company. It is not a lesser test. It is a different test to test different outcomes. That's all there is to it. All right. Wow. Was that my first soapbox? That was my first soapbox. We haven't even gotten through the intro. Unbelievable. All right. So let's go ahead and jump into this. So first things first, there was this bench here. It seemed perfectly fine, no big deal. It's just a normal bench. Well, what you might notice is that there are a couple of hinges. And so then those hinges right there, those hinges mean that there's something hidden underneath it. And there we are. Here are all the keys to get into the property. So I spent a few minutes out front of this property being like, oh my gosh, okay, where is it at? Nobody said where the keys were hidden. And that's the interesting thing about condos and HOAs is that a lot of times they will have keys hidden either in the garage or in like this cabinet or behind this wall or, around the corner in this place. And it's just always funny to kind of have the conversations of like, where did you find that key? Oh, it was right over here. So really interesting stuff. So whenever we're moving into the next thing, this particular well was not operating well. Excuse the pun. Moving on from this, the reason why is because this valve was not operating the way that it's supposed to. As you can see in this picture, basically the water comes over, goes into this expansion tank, and this expansion tank should have a layer of air that can be compressed because water cannot be compressed. And then this valve should be operating the way that it should to create that layer of air and that layer of water. What you can see here on the thermal imaging is basically exactly what we were thinking, is that the water level has risen much higher than it was supposed to. And we have kind of an issue where that valve is not working the way that it was intended, among other things. And so here's the valve, easy replacement. If you can rotate something to the left, you can remove it. If you can rotate something to the right, you can put it back into place and you're golden. So next thing, this particular deck here, many deficiencies with this deck, almost too many to talk about. There were 16 basically pictures that were taken of this deck, but everything that you could do when building a deck was built incorrectly on this deck. And so as just looking at some of these pictures, there's just improper anchoring to the ground. We have issues where we have split pieces of wood. We have issues where things were attached in a way that just does not make sense. Just a lot of issues. And so the problem really comes down to is safety. Is that what happens if you have a group of people on a deck like this? What happens if you're going to use, this deck, this property, this whatever as a rental and you're going to have guests coming? What is your liability and how can we reduce that liability? So absolutely terrible. So here, anytime that there can be water, we really want there to be a GFCI. Now, the modern idea is anywhere that there's a flat surface, there should be a GFCI. And the reason why is because you might have, an aunt, an uncle, a friend who likes to drink and sometimes spill things. And anytime that water can be spilled on a surface where electricity could be, meaning that let's say that I have a blender, let's say I have a toaster, let's say I have any of these things on any of these flat surfaces, I could set my drink down and then have that drink fall over. And then now I have an electrified surface and that would be very dangerous. So again, especially in this area, we need to have a GFCI. Then we have basically the base of this just totally inadequate. It's wood going directly into the ground. We have issues where the support in this whole area was just not done correctly whatsoever. And if you were to, because nothing is anchored together, if you were to hit it and it were to fall over, then the whole structure could fail, fall over, and that's just not great. So this particular wall here, there's some wall movement. And so what does it mean that there is wall movement? Well, whenever you have a retaining wall that is below 4 feet, you don't have to have an engineer come in and say, this is how you're going to build a retaining wall. And most people think, okay, I have a retaining wall, I'm going to put dirt right up against it. And whenever you put the dirt right up against it, yeah, that's great. It looks beautiful. Everything's fine. But then you get rain, you get water. Let's say in this case, you have flowers and plants and you water it every single day. Whenever you do that, what's happening is that you are effectively putting a bunch of water in here, and that water is pushing a bunch of weight onto the edges of this wood, and it's causing that failure to occur. So there's a hydraulic force that is being applied, and so instead of the water coming in there and then falling straight down and going somewhere else, the water falls, gets stuck behind the wall, and now there's a force being pushed out. Then you add freeze and thaw, and then you're just in for a world of hurt. So easy fix on this particular one because it's effectively a raised flower garden, but still pain in the butt. So no guardrail present. This is great. Look, take a look at this picture. Absolutely no guardrail. Now here's the deal. We've been in multi-million-dollar houses where they have decks that just go off into nothing, and there's like a cliff underneath. And my gosh, the risk of death is just through the roof. However, if you were to put up a railing, these multi-million-dollar houses have these gorgeous views that just go right off the deck into nothing. And now the thing is, if grandpa goes right off the deck, he also goes into nothing. So that's bad. And I understand, you know, the aesthetic appeal of having an open deck with nothing exposed, but just keep in mind, every rule, every regulation is basically there because of some legal action taken against somebody or because of somebody's death or injury. And so just keep in mind, the reason that we have these rules is to keep you and your family safe. And so do you have to put a railing on this? No, not at all. If the view is gorgeous and you want to keep it like that, great. There are other issues with this deck, but great. You know, don't put a guardrail on it. That's perfectly fine. All right, end grain. So there needs to be a cap on the end grain. So keep in mind, trees, whenever they're killed, turn into vampires. What I mean by this is that a tree, whenever it is dead, even though it is dead, it will still suck up water. And as it is sucking up that water, it is then going to rot from the inside. And so what we have right here is that we have the top of a tree, and we have a basically the exposed end grain, and any water that lands on that, the tree is going to suck that into that dead log, and then it is going to decompose, which is the natural process of things. And so what you want is a metal cap that just goes over the top. They make some really, really beautiful custom caps that can fit onto any of these logs. You just want to protect the end grain, because if you don't, then the whole thing is going to deteriorate and fall apart. So stone loose. When we have a stone loose, that is very, very common. We have a lot of freeze and thaw, and especially in this style of masonry, there's a large opportunity for water to get into those tiny nooks and crannies. Now, also, whenever you talk about the amount of space that stone is exposed versus the amount of that space that has been mortared into place, there's a significant difference. And so every time that we go around the house, we're always touching, pushing, prodding every little stone to make sure that it is tight. Now, the fix is that normally what you'll see whenever there has been a fix is that they will attach wire to the backside, put the stone in, attach wire, put in the mortar, put the stone, then tie the wire around the stone to hold the stone into place. And then what that does is that as the mortar is curing, then the wire stays there. Then they come back with snips and they snip the wire, and then it looks like nobody was ever there, no repair was ever made. However, most people do the work and then they say, homeowner, make sure you snip these wires, it'll look great. And then the homeowner just never snips the wires. So it's very common to see that there have been stones that have been repaired, super duper common. So sauna, inoperable. So the main thing is with these saunas is that, as it says, the controls to turn on the sauna, we're not turning on the sauna. We will only turn on the sauna. We will only turn on the heater. We will only turn on basically anything using the normal controls. We are not going to bypass, jumper, or do anything to make something turn on. Either it works for the homeowner and works without issue, or it doesn't work. That's all there is to it. And so if we go here and we press these buttons and it doesn't work, then it doesn't work. Now, what's actually going on? Could the water have been turned off? Yes. Could the power to the steamer be turned off? Turned off. Could the power be turned off? Could the water to the steamer be turned off? Could we have a valve that is shut? Could we have a million different things? Yes. Are we going to open the valve? No. Are we going to plug in the power? No. Are we going to do anything else to modify it? No. Either it works or it does not work. Now, am I here to diagnose what the issue is? No. I am here to tell you that there is an issue. And then what will happen is that we will have somebody who's a sauna expert come in, say, oh yeah, here are the issues. Because if I just turn it on and it works, maybe the reason it was off is because there was an underlying issue that I may not have known or identified because I am not an expert in saunas from this manufacturer or from this range of dates of manufacture, and I don't have all the ins and outs. Whereas a specialist, once I say, hey man, sauna's not working the way it is supposed to, they come in, they say, oh wow, sauna's not working the way it's supposed to, and did you know that in 1995 they made an update that's blah, 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 blah. That's not for us to do. Our job is to say it works or it doesn't work. So this one didn't work. No big deal. Moving on, guardrail not present. So basically, right here, yes, I do. Fantastic. So this is an upper loft area, and this upper loft area, super amazing space. Really good, great for kids until they fall off the edge. Now, a few other things to keep in mind is that, okay, maybe the kid is not going to fall off the edge. Hopefully the kid won't fall off the edge. But you know what kids love doing? They love throwing things off of the edge. And so we're going to have toys. We're going to have all kinds of stuff just raining down from that upper loft. And that's either going to damage the floor, damage the toy, or damage grandpa's head as he's walking over, and then we just have a transformer hit him in the head. That's not ideal. So we want to put something up there to help protect the children, the people, whatever, that are going to be using that space for fun. So please stop trying to kill our home inspectors. That's all there is to it. This is a self-tapping screw. If you are familiar with screws, there are self-tapping and not self-tapping. This is a self-tapping metal screw, meaning its job is to make contact with metal, continue to spin, and then dig its way through hardened metal. And so whenever we're talking about a soft little copper line, this is a great way to nick the copper conductor and then make contact with the copper that's inside, and then electrify the entire panel and possibly yourself at the same time. Use blunt-nosed screws. The blunt nose means that whenever it hits a wire, it's just going to push the wire backwards. What we're doing right now is actually cutting through the wire, and it's going to end up causing us to have an issue later on down the line. So, patch repair, areas on ceilings. So basically, previous repair, this particular one did not have any moisture, but whenever there's patchwork, what we like to do is we take our moisture meter. It has two prongs, and those two prongs get stuck up into that space, and then is able to calculate whether or not there is moisture present or not, because I can touch something and it feels cold. Does that mean that it's cold, or does that mean that it's wet? I have no idea. I can look with the thermal camera and I can see a cold spot. Does that mean it's cold, or does that mean it's wet? I have no idea. As soon as I take that probe and I stick it in, it says, oh, hey buddy, it's wet. We have a problem. In this particular case, there was nothing wrong with this area. We double checked it with the device to make sure there was no moisture. So the moisture meter checked it, said that we're good to go, but we still let the homeowner know, hey, there was a patch. We're not sure why there was a patch. So you might want to talk to maybe the seller and say, hey seller, I'm inquiring with you to find out why is there this patch? And they could say, oh, well, we actually, it turns out we didn't disclose that we had a massive leak. Oh, okay, well, did you properly fix it? Yes. Well, all right. So I already lost my trust with you. So maybe I'll do a little bit further investigation to find out, do I have any underlying mold issues? Because can mold be trapped in that space? Yes. If that space cannot breathe and allow that moisture out, mold could have grown because mold is everywhere. The thing is, there has to be the Goldilocks zone. If it is too wet, too dry, then we will not have mold growth. If it is just right, then the mold will grow. As soon as it is no longer just right, then the mold dies. But it can still have lasting health effects potentially. But I mean, again, not that big of a deal in Colorado because everything is so dry. So moving on, deck, poor build quality. Yes, that is one of the most common things that we get is poor build quality. I had a guy who is a builder, and I did a deck, and I'm like, man, you won't believe it. This deck was so good. Everything was perfect. It was done, just the way that I would want it to be done. Everything was perfect, proper, whatever. It was amazing. And he's like, what was the address? And I'm like, it was this. He's like, oh, that's one of my decks. I'm like, oh my God. Well, that makes sense why we're friends, because you really do a good job. But some of these decks, no. All right. So maybe this is a little over the top, but it's not. if we look at all these arrows coming in right here, we have toenails to support the rim joist, i.e. 6 nails per side to support the entire deck. There are literally 6 nails on each side holding the entire deck on because they improperly installed this deck. It should have been ledger board and then having the deck. So if this is your ledger board, then the deck is supposed to go on it like this and have hangers and all this kind of stuff. Well, they did it like this into the end grain. So those 6 nails are going into the end grain of the ledger board to hold on the entire deck. You got to be kidding me. Okay, so why has the deck not failed? Well, the reason why is because then they also took the decking boards on top and screwed them so the floorboards were running this way, which is a whole other thing as to why they should not have been running that way in the first place. But this is actually what saved the deck, is that they ended up screwing those into the ledger board, and that is what has prevented, it's the walking surface that has actually become the structural member to prevent that deck from falling off. Holy cow, it's insane. The next thing is, there's a reason why we're told to do 6x6s or larger as opposed to 4x4s. And the reason why is because if you take a look at this rim joist is not actually supported, because whenever you put 2.5 inch pieces of material together, then basically what happens is that you got yourself 3 inches of material, and a 4x4 is only 3.5 inches. So we really only have, if we're lucky, 1/2 inch of support for this rim joist. In this particular case, this one was not actually making contact. So just little things like that that can make a deck extremely, extremely unsafe. Oh, and then also this ledger board, they never removed any of the siding. And so it was basically that you have wood and then you have siding and then you have the ledger board. And so that siding can compress one way or another. And if that happens, then we are just out of luck. All right, so we just need to have safe decks is what we need to have. So right here we have floor condition, elevated moisture content present. This was also very interesting. So what we will look at right here is that we have a couple of pictures and the underlying culprit is this right here. So what happened was they had a lot of snow buildup on the deck. This basically was like a dark area where there was no sunlight to melt off any of the snow. And so what would happen is in this corner, they would have a lot of buildup of snow. And so then what they decided to do was that they would take matters into their own hands and that they would do some kind of flashing to prevent that water from going back into the house, because water was going back into the house. Well, so they put in this flashing, but the problem is that they basically had siding and then they put the flashing. And so any of the water that was on the siding now went behind the flashing. And because there was flashing, the water was getting trapped. So the flashing was doing absolutely nothing, absolutely nothing. And so, what was happening here is that on the underside, we had elevated levels of moisture. We had some deterioration, some rot. If we look at these pictures over here with the red arrows, then that's saying the flashing is not doing what it's supposed to do. Inside the house, the breezeway there was moisture levels, it was damp, it was whatever. And all of this could have been avoided if they did not install this and if they properly shoveled their deck. Now, the overall solution whenever we were talking to the buyers is that they have these metal grates that you can put down for like the stairs that you'd have at a ski resort or sometimes right before the entryway of a house to knock the snow off and it goes down underneath the deck. What was happening is that we had a lot of water coming down from the roof. And then so that water that was coming down from the roof was dripping and splashing back, getting behind the flashing. We had a whole bunch of issues such as that. And if we would have just had this corrugated, well, not corrugated, but if we had this metal underneath, then what would happen is that we would actually be able to have any melting snow or ice just fall right through the deck and then not go back into the house. Or you can just shovel your deck, one or the other. I mean, actually all of it would be great. So just something to think about there. So moving on, negative grade present. So basically we want water to slope away from the house. If the ground is going towards the house, that slope is going towards the house, then we're going to have issues with water. So we want the ground sloping away from the house so water goes away from the house. That's the objective. And to fix that, it's not necessarily the hardest thing to do, but if you cannot manually remove material to cause that swale to move away from the house, then what you need to do is install French drains. So that way the water will go in and then it'll be taken out and go elsewhere. So inadequate insulation. So this was an interesting house because what you can see on these thermal images is that there is no insulative properties whatsoever. And they basically walled off this room that used to be an attic space, and then they created it into like a large closet. The problem here with creating that as a large closet is that now we have inside walls and outside walls intermingling, but they never adjusted the insulation. So now we basically have an area of the house that will just be super energy inefficient. And because they put up that other wall and they remove the exterior wall, that attic space now becomes effectively a living conditioned space, but not properly insulated. And so it's going to draw all that heat away from the house and just totally increase your electrical bills. And so that is just one of those things that, are we doing an energy audit? No, we're not doing an energy audit. No way. But what we are doing is we're taking a look at the house and saying this just was not done correctly. And we have the understanding that from an energy perspective, you're throwing money out the window. In this case, you're throwing money through the walls. So just a little bit of insulation would be great. All right, this one. I've seen 2 of these in the past month and I don't get it. So basically the flue pipe, what is happening on this chimney here is, if you can take a look, imagine that I'm coming up the chimney and I'm hot gas and I am flame. So hot gas and flame, if there's a proper draft, you should just be sucked right up the center. But until a proper draft is created, or if I'm making too large of a fire, then all of those flames can now go through where these little arrows are pointing. And whenever this happens, then I can superheat the walls and I can catch the house on fire. So whenever they installed this, and it was really interesting on this one, I don't know if I have a picture of it. I do not, but on this one, they had to like bend and bang and hit the metal to make the metal fit a certain way. And whenever they did that, then they could slide it inside. And I'm like, is it not obvious that if you had to modify it that much, that it should have slid over the outside, not to the inside? Because they like bent it, kinked it, twisted it, and then pushed it in just to get it to fit inside. And it's just not knowing what you're doing, but doing it anyway. Bad mix, especially whenever it comes to fire and superheated gases. So anytime that you see a brick chimney, anytime that you see masonry lined, like a clay lined chimney, it's done, it's over. They don't make those anymore. And so the fact that you have one means that there are cracks. Again, superheated gases can go in there. They can catch your house on fire. What you want to do is you want to have a sleeve put into it. Now, the problem is that some fireplaces, because of their size, have a certain size chimney opening. And that chimney opening, if I put a circular pipe into a square opening, then the actual surface area, the square footage, is changed. It is reduced. And so that reduction can cause problems. And so anytime that I have something like this, yes, it would be ideal to just put a sleeve in there. But if the chimney is too large, physically, it should not be allowed to accept that, because we'll run into issues and have problems where we can't get a proper draft because the firebox is too large and the size of the chimney pipe is too small. So something to keep in mind, make sure you have an expert do anything to do with chimneys, just super duper important. This chimney was super deteriorated, just lots of problems on the chimney. So Zinsco, here we go. If you have Zinsco, get it replaced. If you have Federal Pacific, get it replaced. The main thing to keep in mind here with Zinsco is that there's actually a company out there that will make Zinsco replacement breakers that are safe to use inside the panel. Don't do it. Don't waste your money. Just replace the panel. And why is it that we want to replace the panel? Because then you have the opportunity to use AFCI breakers, arc fault circuit interrupters. You have the ability to use GFCI breakers, ground fault circuit interrupters. You have the ability to have new breakers on a new bus bar with new everything to make sure that we have good electrical conductivity to make sure that we don't have any problems with overheating, which could then lead to fire. Just get rid of it. Manufacturers say every 40 years you should replace that entire box anyway. These are past that point. Get new ones. That's all there is to it. So next thing is the service entrance here. Just bad. Basically, here's the guidelines of how far away from the roof you should be. And then also keep in mind trees and rubbing and all kinds of different things. Just, really be safe, really be careful. Make sure it's doing the right stuff. Call the electrical company, get it modified, get it changed, because believe me, having a house burned down because you have abrasion on those wires that then results in a fire or an arc that then results in the sparking or catching on fire of the house. And if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure, yeah, these are wood shingles, and these are the old school wood shingles before they impregnated them with fire retardant. And so these are the wood shingles that want to catch on fire. So this is just bad news bears all the way around. So get it fixed. All right, here's the deal. Light's not functional. Yep, light's not functional. All right, so we let you know. Well, wouldn't it be nice if you just replaced the light bulb and tested it? Sure would be. Not going to do it. Why are we not going to do it? Well, the reason we're not going to do it is because if we set a standard that if a light bulb is burned out, then we replace the light bulb to make sure that the fixture as a whole is working properly. Well, so if we set that as the standard, then we walk into a living room. Oh, well, this lamp, or not lamp, but like this light is not working. This canned light is not working. Okay, so you unscrew the canned light, you replace it, good to go, all set. Oh, well, in this vaulted ceiling, this canned light over here, this doesn't work. So then we're going to go up there and we're going to get our 30-foot ladder. We're going to go into this vaulted ceiling and we're going to replace it. No, that is not what we do. We are not handymen that go and replace things. What we are doing is we are identifying that there is an issue. We're pretty sure that it's a burnt out light bulb. You're pretty sure it's a burnt out light bulb, but it could be more. So whenever we come to a situation like this, just talk to your realtor, have them put a little clause that, hey, if it's not a burnt out light bulb, then we would like to have this particular fixture above the vanity replaced. And that would be totally appropriate. That takes 2 sentences on a contract to be able to have that occur. Versus getting out a 30-foot ladder, going up there, making replacements. What if the light bulbs that we have are also burned out? Then we say, no, you have to replace the whole thing. It's just easier to say, hey, there's an underlying issue. We're pretty sure that it's a burnt out bulb. And that would be basically that. All right. So furnace ignition failure and furnace past design life. So the thing to keep in mind about this particular furnace is that just because a furnace is past its design life does not mean that the furnace is no longer any good. Here's how a furnace works. I ask for heat, it gives me heat. That's it. If I ask for heat and it gives me heat, it works. We're done. It's no issue. So just because the furnace is past its design life, no big deal. What we're telling you is that there's a roll of the dice. And if you're able, with the aid of your realtor, to negotiate with the seller to say, hey man, this is a 30-year-old thing. This one right here was from 1989. So I have this thing from 1989, and I really want you to replace it because you're the one that has used it for the last 32 years. I have not. It was supposed to be replaced at 20 years. So here's the deal. Give me some money so I can get this thing repaired, replaced, whatever, or just replace it for me. Excellent. Great choice. Love it. Now, let's say you can't negotiate. Okay, well then you can just keep running this thing because until something breaks that is too expensive to replace versus just, replacing the entire thing. So to repair the part, if that becomes too expensive, then yeah, replace the whole thing. But if I today spend 10 grand to replace my furnace, then today I spent 10 grand. And if in 15 years, whenever it actually dies, I spend 10 grand, well, then in 15 years, I spent 10 grand. It doesn't matter. It does not matter when it is that I do what I do. What I'm saying is that your risk is increased because of its age. And if you're comfortable with that risk, then replace it whenever you feel comfortable or do your best to negotiate. Now on this one, the furnace would not ignite. And I believe this was Jeremy's inspection, and he went through a lot of steps to try to get this thing to ignite, and it would not ignite. We went above and beyond to make sure this thing would ignite, and it would not ignite. So at the end of the day, it's past its design life. We're having mechanical issues. You can have somebody come out and repair it, but the negotiation really should be, it's not working the way it's intended. It's really, really old. Get it replaced. And I think that having this 1-2 punch right here is really a good way to make sure that you have the strongest ability to negotiate. So moving on to this porch had some type of like a vinyl cover over top of the concrete, and the waterproofing membrane was failing and it was bubbling. And so with this thing bubbling, and there have been some previous repairs, what you want to find out is it the HOA or is it not the HOA at this particular condo complex? I think this was in Keystone. Was this HOA responsible for the repair, or are you the homeowner responsible for the repair? Important to know these things because does it matter? Meh, not really. But if it keeps getting worse, then we could potentially have some damage to some things that will be more expensive. And so you really, whenever you start seeing an issue like this, you want to get it resolved as quickly as possible. So this right here, the vanity was not anchored to the wall. Does it really matter if the vanity wasn't anchored to the wall? Well, I mean, not really. But, if you've ever bought anything from IKEA, they make you sign this big thing that says that if you don't anchor this to the wall and somebody gets hurt, that's not our fault. All right, so same thing is that you want to have this anchored to the wall because you don't want it to fall over and hurt anybody. Now, the thing is, this was put on carpet. And so if you're familiar, it's subfloor, padding, carpet, which means a lot of room for wobbling. So this thing wobbled quite a bit. Now, in addition to wobbling, basically what's happening here is that this vanity is attached to plumbing, and the plumbing that it's attached to does not have the ability to flex. And so every time that this moves, we are basically putting we are fatiguing the metal and causing a point where we are going to have a failure. And so anytime that you add fatigue to a material, over time it will degrade and it will damage and it'll break, and then in this case it'll flood. And so if we were to anchor this to the wall, then that would stop any movement whatsoever with any of the plumbing. So next thing is space inadequate. Pretty please. Like, get somebody to modify your drapes. If you don't know how to sew, find somebody that knows how to sew, or pay somebody who does that as a profession to sew your drapes to make them the appropriate length, or take the bar, raise the bar up a little bit higher above the window if you have the space, because you 100% do not want to have your drapes or anything in direct contact with any of these heating baseboards. You will catch your house on fire. All right, protectant is failing. All right, I can already hear the people saying, John, it's cedar. It doesn't need protectant. All right, you're right. It is. It is cedar. It doesn't need protectant, but it looks bad. It looks really bad. So I cannot put any protectant on it and it'll look just fine. Should I put kickout flashing there? Yes, I didn't, whatever. So this is cedar. Doesn't need to have any kind of protectant. It's naturally protected, but you can see that we have fading and other things like that. So I could paint the house. That would be stupid because then I would lose all of the natural effects of the cedar. But that paint would last me, maybe 15 years. Let's say 12 to 15 years. If I were to stain it, then we're talking like 5 to 8 years. Every 5 to 8 years, I need to restain the cedar to make sure we're good to go. In this particular case, I would definitely make sure that I do something. Also here, there was so much just like, there was graffiti. I don't know if you can see the graffiti right here, but just one of those things. So seal failure, elevation, potentially. I don't know for a fact that it was elevation, but whenever every single window in the house has a broken seal, meaning that moisture can come in and now the windows have fogged, we've lost a lot of the R value, and I guess there's even like the U value, but basically the R value of the window for how well it can protect or how well it can keep heat inside the house or cold or whatever. Basically, it's the R value is how good of an insulative property it has. And whenever a window seal breaks, it doesn't necessarily matter the R value because windows are so energy inefficient anyway. But the thing to keep in mind about this is that every single window had this. And so I bet you that they bought windows that were designed, manufactured at a lower elevation and were not ever properly equalized at this elevation, which resulted in the seal failing and then moisture coming in. So does it matter to replace these? No, except they had beautiful views. And now you can see in some of those pictures that every single window is just fogged over. And because of that, it looks terrible. You cannot appreciate the views the same way. It's tea time. All right. Moving on to wiring. So this wiring was basically abandoned. And so what was going on here is that we had some wiring coming out on the outside of this house, and there's a wire nut, a single wire nut. Now, wire nuts are not the proper termination. I mean, it is good to have a wire nut, but you need to put that wire inside of a junction box because that wire nut could be knocked off by snow and ice, by an animal, by a child, by anything. And this wire was super duper live. So we don't want to catch the house on fire and we don't want to kill anybody. So keep that in mind. Oh, this makes me smile. This absolutely makes me smile. So incorrect material used as a TPRV discharge pipe. Temperature pressure relief valves are basically set up where they are going to release water at a pressure. So they're going to release the water at a certain pressure and at a certain temperature. So the pressure is going to be 150 PSI. So if it gets to 150 PSI, this is for most residential water heaters. So 150 PSI. If it gets to 150 PSI, then it will release water at 150 PSI. Awesome. And then it'll also, if it doesn't reach 150 PSI, but let's say the water temperature reaches 250 degrees Fahrenheit, then the water will be released. All the water at whatever pressure it's at will be released at 250 degrees Fahrenheit, which is instant contact, third degree burns, you're going to the hospital kind of a thing, at 250 degrees Fahrenheit. The section that is, blocked off right up here, what's awesome about this is that it specifically states right there, and it couldn't be more clear, I just snapped a photo of it, 80 PSI, 200 degrees Fahrenheit. and you are attaching it to a valve that will only open at 150 psi and 250 degrees Fahrenheit. All right, so moving on, just one of those things. It just boggles the mind. And again, this was not a home install. A professional plumber installed this. And they installed it to a 150 psi, 250 degree Fahrenheit temperature pressure relief valve. The label is right on the top. It tells you exactly what it's going to release to. And right here, not more than 4 inches away from that label is this label that says this pipe is not correct for this application. It's funny. It's very, very funny. All right, we already talked about this well, short cycling and the issues that we were having there. Wood storage. Pretty please, don't put your wood up against the house. Not only does that trap moisture and can damage the wood and all kinds of things like that, but now we have animals, rodents, insects, anything now up against the house. Not to mention the risk of fire. If a spark were to occur and we had like a major fire season and an ember or spark, comes and it lands on this wood, your house may not have caught on fire, but this will. And then this will just set your whole house ablaze. We really need to make sure that we have defensible spaces, especially where we live. We need to have defensible spaces. It is a must. So, falling hazard nearby foundation. This is awesome. So basically, this is a like a cold cellar, like basically like the same as like a tornado cellar or something like that. And they just have it covered over with a really, really rickety piece of metal and a really rotten, dry rotted piece of plywood. The risk of falling inside here and getting severely injured was severe. So pretty please, just if you have a property that is unsafe, do the things you need to do to make sure the property is safe. Do things to keep others safe. So retaining wall leaning, I think we talked about this, the hydraulic effect. This retaining wall seemed really, really tall. And of course, that is because of water building up behind it and pushing that wall over. That is going to continue and continue. And what really should have been done, it was either a French drain or some layer of rock that is kind of like built up along that to make sure that the water doesn't push directly up against that retaining wall. All right, stone not installed. So everywhere else, there's like this beautiful stone, except for in these two places. And it was just that either they ran out and didn't want to order new stone or, a million different things, but they never finished the job. Gorgeous house, but they never finished the job. And so here's a better example of what we're looking at right here. And right on the other side, actually, right where my hand is right now, this is where the stone then continues again. I think they just ran out of stone, is my guess. Or they were bad installers, because here's their roof. Now, this particular customer did not pay for us to walk on the roof. However, I was looking at the roof with the 360 camera and I'm like, is that just the snow and ice shield? Is that just like the underlayment? Am I really seeing this correctly? And I'm like, I got to check this out. So you know what they say killed the cat or the home inspector is curiosity. So anyway, went up onto the roof and lo and behold, here's the roof. Here's all the pictures if you want to just take a look at those right there. All right. And then here is, I think, one of the better pictures of this roof where they just didn't put in any of the roof or reinstall it. Now, what ended up happening is, I guess, that the seller had a leak, which doesn't surprise me because the way that this particular roof line was installed, like they're going to have a leak. That's just the reality. So then somebody came out, then they installed this, reinstalled, whatever they did. Still, in my opinion, didn't do it 100% correctly. And then put the roofing back on top. Great, put the roofing back on top, we're all fine. So it's just interesting that a lot of people don't finish their jobs, and I know that as a homeowner, it is not necessarily your responsibility to to be an expert on all things. But my problem is that people are going to take advantage of you as much as they possibly can to make a buck, and that really rubs me the wrong way. And so with things like this right here, no homeowner is going to, this roof was high. Okay. I needed a big boy ladder for this one. And so no homeowner is going to go up there and double check and say, well, Jim Bob, you did a really bad job here. I'd like you to come back up and fix it for me. Nobody's going to do that, because even if you did go up, the expert would say, well, this over here was actually installed correctly per manufacturer guidelines, which is why I included manufacturer guidelines on how to install this stuff. Like anytime that there is something and somebody says, well, this is the way it was intended. Well, let me just pull up manufacturer guidelines. And here, the manufacturer, because this is the manufacturer you use, specifically states that this right here should not be exposed to direct UV light. And if it is, over a period of time, it should be fully removed and new stuff should be replaced before being covered over with the proper roof covering. So anyway, next thing, metal roof scratched. So what we can see on this roof is that we have an asphalt shingle that then goes to a metal roof. Beautiful, like beautiful lines, beautiful everything. Again, this house was gorgeous. But the thing about this is that a lot of architects and home designers don't think about every aspect of the home. Sometimes they think about the aesthetics before they think about the function. And so the only thing that I will say here is that these scratches that are degrading the lifespan of this metal roof, which should be a 100-year roof, the reason that this roof is not going to make it to 50 years is because we have all of these granules scratching the roof. Because what's happening is all of these asphalt shingles, little bits of basically sand, stone, rock, whatever, are falling down and coming down as we have natural just rainfall, abrasion, breaking down, whatever, and it comes down and hits this metal roof. Now on this metal roof, we get snow and ice that get built up, and we have a weight that is applied to the roof. Now that weight, just like a glacier, whenever we have cold nights, warm days, during the warm days, we're gonna have movement and then it's gonna freeze. And then we're gonna have movement and it's gonna freeze. And all of that weight is just like how the glaciers carved out our landscapes, is gonna do the exact same thing to your roof over time. This house is brand new, and this is what the roof looks like after one season. So just keep in mind that if you are going to do a design, put metal roof on top and then put asphalt shingles down below, because you do not want the granules to destroy a very expensive custom-made roof. Just some soapbox, just something I'm thinking about. So flashing not installed. On this particular house, you can see there's just a lot of places where flashing just was not installed. And so we have the ability for water to get trapped behind this, and that is, not great. So there should have been like a Z flashing type thing where it's, so we have siding, flashing, and then the flashing comes down, and then we have new siding behind it right there. So the flashing basically will take anything that gets trapped behind the siding and bring it out, and then make sure that the next rung of flashing that it is, falling in front of. So that's the way that should happen. It did not happen that way right here. So anyway, not much that can be done at this point. That should have been done way in the past. So the next thing is homemade structure, inadequate, not designed for a hot tub, all kinds of deck issues. This is silly, absolutely silly. It goes back to the first deck that we saw. Improper anchoring, improper footings, improper contact of wood. In this particular case, improper leveraging, like understanding how levers work and how things get taken care of. It just blows my mind. So anyway, long story short on this is that this was done wrong, and it should have been done correctly, but it was not. And they had a hot tub on top of it. And so the risk of killing somebody is obscene. So graffiti on the walls. There was graffiti everywhere. It was crayon on wood. It was crayon on television. It was crayon all of these places. The problem with crayon on wood is crayon is a wax. There is no way to draw that wax out of the wood. The wood, which was in a beautiful log cabin, has like a natural rough sawn kind of finish to it. It doesn't have any polyurethane on it. It isn't sanded smooth. It has like this really, really cool rough cut type of thing that's going on. But now, because it's covered in crayon, there's nothing you can do to remove that crayon. It just is there. And if you sanded everything down, then nothing will look the way that it was supposed to. So just pain in the butt. Okay, so this heat tape here, they installed heat tape. But did they? Because they ran the heat tape to make the heat tape look good, and then they never finished installing it. But they sold the house as if the heat tape was there, properly installed. And so Yeah, the heat tape was just, you know, what, we're going to get a soapbox here in a minute. I'm going to finish this and then I'm going to soapbox. Just keep in mind the heat tape, all right? Then we come in, the well recovery test completely failed. The well head was way too low. The well head was unprotected. It had a piece of, just a log standing up. Here's the well head. So we can totally get water coming into this space. So somebody was like, I want a bigger driveway. And this is literally in the center of the driveway. And it is only a few inches. So 4 inches. 4 inches. If you get 4 inches of snow in a high alpine environment, I think this house is like 9,000 something feet. If you get 4 inches of snow, which is very common, now we have water that can come back into, our wellhead. And so any contaminant that was on the driveway or anything like that, dang, just dang. Yeah. And then, so here's the well that failed. So this well failed, numerous times. And it had, basically 170 gallons worth of water that was stored, but it had a 10 gallon per minute pump pumping all the water out of here, which this basically took out all this water in 10 minutes. So let's see what this says. The water was only able to run for 23 minutes before it ran dry. The storage tank was being refilled at a rate of approximately 3.2 gallons, meaning that this well was able to produce 74 gallons before running dry. The 200-gallon storage tank is helpful, but the storage tank pump can run at 11 gallons per minute, meaning that the storage tank can be run dry in like 18 minutes. If the storage tank is completely full, the home may have approximately 275 gallons before running dry for an unknown length of time before the well is fully recovered and able to draw another 74 gallons. So basically, the well can only draw 74 gallons at a time. And is that adequate? Not really. You definitely would want another storage tank to make this work the way you're supposed to. But at this point, no good. And so I think this one is, yeah. So this house, we're just going to go, this is my soapbox, okay? So now we're on a soapbox. I am so aggravated by people who take advantage of other people. There was a house, let's just say one of the houses that we just talked about, that had a failing well or failed well, had a wellhead that was in a dangerous location for both bacterial contamination, chemical contamination, and damage from snow removal or just driving in general. It had a roof that was totally destroyed. It had heat tape that was installed in a manner that makes it look like heat tape was installed to the untrained eye, but heat tape was not installed. They had siding that was installed to make it look pretty, but the siding was not pretty. Had a homemade deck that was made supporting a hot tub that was not designed to support a hot tub. You had basically an undermining of the supports of the deck, of all this kind of stuff. You just had issue after issue after issue. You had holes in the roof there, and then that's just on the outside. That doesn't even talk about the inside. And this house was being sold for an obscene amount of money by a realtor who disclosed that none of these issues and purposefully did things in a way to increase the selling price of the house, knowing full well, because they sell houses all the time, that they have multiple deficiencies, none of which were ever disclosed about the well, about anything. There was nothing. That it was an unlawful lock-off, meaning that that this lock-off and this whole thing also stems from this, is that you were not allowed to have this as a separate living area. There's just all these issues, right, with this house. And golly, it makes me upset because the person selling the house, and I don't know their situation, I don't know their needs, I don't know whatever, and I know everybody's trying to make a buck. But as a realtor, if you can't be trusted to sell your house with integrity, how are you going to help me buy my own house with integrity? How are you going to make sure that I get the house that I'm supposed to have? And like, I understand a homeowner wanting to be a shyster and get some extra money out of somebody, but whenever a realtor does it, that just really, really upsets me, because a realtor should be held to a higher level or a higher standard, especially whenever it comes to houses. And if they aren't doing that, shame on them. That's all I have to say about that. Shame on them. This was so inappropriate for them to be asking the amount of money that they're asking, to be acting like the house is this amazing thing whenever it has all these issues that they know about. Issues from electrical to plumbing to septic to everything wrong with this house you could think of. This house had, I believe, for me personally, the most number of issues this calendar year. Worst house I've inspected. And to say that there's nothing to disclose, that there's no issues with this house whatsoever, as a realtor, shame on you. Anyway, that's a soapbox, and we did it. All right, moving on. So let's go ahead and take a look here. Radon. So improper radon exhaust termination. So there's a lot to be said about radon, but basically radon, we want to get it up and away. So radon doesn't naturally want to go up. Radon kind of just hangs out where it is, and it goes to areas of low pressure. So if this right here next to this window, you open up the window, boom, you got radon coming right back in. And the radon needs to just be taken up, out, and away, so that way it can mix with the natural air and it doesn't come back into the house. It's a radioactive gas. Why are we messing around with radioactive gas? Get it gone. That's all I got to say about that. So trees being killed. There were some aspens that were being held together with some straps, and those straps have now, tightened around the aspens, and they are cutting into the aspens, and they more than likely will, if they don't kill these aspens, let's say you cut the straps today, you remove it, the aspens heal. The aspens will always have a weak point here. So as they grow taller, they will break at that weak point. Less than ideal. So floor not level, further evaluation. So this is a very, very old house, and the floor wasn't level. So why does that happen? Well, naturally, there's going to be some sort of a sag to the floor. You have your floor joist, and then you have wood spanning the floor joist, and there's going to be a natural sag over time. In this particular house, they weren't necessarily concerned. This is basically like what would be referred to as a hunting cabin. Somewhere where in the middle of the woods, you go out, you got yourself a hunting cabin, good to go. Just a nice little place to head over to. It also had solar electricity. Now, the solar electricity was not tested because there's a lot of tests that can be taken from the photovoltaic cells to say, okay, well, this is how much it should be producing. This is how much it is producing. This is the efficiency. Then we come in, we have the power inverter. Okay, this is how much the power inverter is able to do. Then we have like basically the brains of the operation that's saying this is how much power needs to be sent to the batteries to be recharged or not, and testing that. Then the batteries, this is how good the batteries are, how much of a load, how much of a life they have, how many battery cycles they may have been through. Then we have is the solar system ample or large enough to handle the electrical demands of this particular property. All of that is above and beyond. I turn on the light switches. Do they work? Yes, they do. Turn off the light switches. Does that work? Yes, it does. In this particular house, not only did we have to turn on the water, we also had to turn on the electricity, and I think we had to turn on the gas as well. It's a lot of things to turn on. We don't normally turn them on, but it was an agreement that we would. And so, again, turning on an entire solar array, there's a lot to be known about a solar array and how things are supposed to be tested, run, so on and so forth. So just make sure you have a really good understanding. In general terms, this appeared to be adequate for this particular house and what the needs were of this house. And that pretty much comes down to that. The only thing about this house is that this house was a 3-season house, meaning that this house could not be used year round. There was no, like you could burn wood to be there for 4 seasons, but it was crazy. The roads were just so up and down, so crazy. The truck did not fit, basically. And there was probably, there was no access for winter unless you went up with your snowmobile. But then for water, the water was actually a storage tank that had an above ground water line running to the house. And so you would take your ATV, fill up some water, and then pour the water into this, 500 gallon, storage tank. And then that was your water supply for the season or whatever. Really interesting way of doing it, especially whenever there's no well, there's no plumbing, there's no nothing. Again, it's just it's just a hunting cabin, and totally appropriate for what it is. Just keep in mind that there are some houses that we have seen that claim to be a 4-season house, and they are not a 4-season house. They are basically no more than a hunting cabin that you can only be at as if you were camping, not a real thing. Because there are off-grid houses that are true off-grid 4-season houses, and then there are off-grid houses that have no hope of being a 4-season house. It's just 3 seasons or less, basically. So that's the end of this. If anybody has any questions, visit twomoosehomeinspections.com, shoot us an email, give us a call. If you'd like to schedule a home inspection, give us a call to the office, or you can use our online scheduler. And I think that pretty much concludes this in-service training. So thank you for watching, and have a great rest of your day.